Hey guys, today on Chris Cookin' Nashville, we have a very special recipe and some very special guests. We are gonna do a carnivore beef stroganoff with carnivore egg noodles, and joining me all the way from their home are Alice and Kevin, the keto carnivore couple. Say hi, guys.
Thanks for having us, Chris. We really appreciate being guests on your channel. We really appreciate everything you've done for the carnivore and keto communities, and we really love your recipes as well.
All right, y'all, this is the first of a brand new series I want to start doing. I'm going to do some shout outs to some of our favorite keto and carnivore people in this world. I'm going to make some recipes specifically for them. This was a request of Alice and Kevin, and it meets all of the dietary requirements and all of the desires of a particular kind of dish that they wanted to have that they gave me. So I'm gonna see how well I can do. I'm gonna send them the recipe, they're gonna try it out, and they're gonna tell you what they think. Let's make some carnivore beef stroganoff today on Chris Cookin' Nashville. All right, I hope you guys are ready. Alice and Kevin, I hope you guys are ready. Here we go. I'm using thin sliced ribeye steaks. Now, that's an expensive cut of meat. Absolutely can do something like get a chuck roast, cut it into little pieces, pressure cook it on high for like an hour, hour and a half, get it nice and tender, and use that beef. You can absolutely do that, but typically a stroganoff is a quick cook kind of dish, and we're going to use the ribeye because it's gonna work perfectly for this. Happen to have them on sale. This is a great way to use them and not miss out on that sale. So I have about 3.5 pounds of ribeye. You wanna do 3/4 of a pound to a pound per person. I'm gonna give you the ratios here along with the amounts so you can scale this recipe up or down however it suits your needs. I have a seasoning mixture here. Everything in here is a 1/2 teaspoon except the onion powder. All of the seasonings are totally optional. You don't want to use any seasonings and go super clean, you can totally do that too. I have a 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder, of dry thyme, parsley, dried chives, black pepper, paprika, 1 teaspoon onion powder, because I like a little more of that onion flavor. I also, and this is again very optional, this is just a personal taste thing, I also put in about 1/8 of a teaspoon of nutmeg. It's not gonna be enough that you taste nutmeg, it's just gonna soften everything. I have 32 ounces of bone broth, a beef bone broth. Ideally, just make your own. About 32 ounces for roughly close to 4 pounds of meat. So you're looking about 8 ounces of broth per pound of meat, roughly. 16 ounces of sour cream, full fat sour cream, half volume in weight. So 16 ounces by weight of sour cream for about 32 ounces of bone broth. A couple of really strange optional things here. 4 tablespoons of brewed coffee that was left over. This is really, really nice in here. I know that sounds strange, but because we're not using a tomato base that I would normally use to make a beef flavor really stand out, we're gonna use a little bit of coffee. Freeze it in some ice cubes. 4 ice cubes is about 4 tablespoons. If you don't do coffee, leave it out. I also have about 1/2 of a teaspoon of shrimp powder. It's optional, but again, it's really nice. It brings out that umami flavor of the beef. For the noodle portion of this, I have 8 eggs, 3.5 ounces of mozzarella cheese. I shredded it myself here in my blender. You can do this with a mixer. You could probably do it in a food processor. I'm gonna use my blender just because it's easy, and then I can pour it out into the pans that I'm gonna bake the noodles in. However many eggs you have, half that many ounces of cheese. And you don't have to use mozzarella. You can use cheddar or Colby Jack or something that's soft, that gets melty. However many eggs you have, half that many ounces roughly of cheese. I have 2 extra eggs hanging out over here in a bowl. We're gonna use those later when we put the dish together. I have 2 tablespoons of egg white powder, 2 teaspoons of beef gelatin. Any unflavored gelatin is fine. I'm just using beef, but you can also use the cheap unflavored gelatin you can find in the store. When I season the meat, when I go to brown it, and I'll show you how we do that, I'm gonna use smoked salt. You do not have to, you can use any salt that you want, regular Redmond salt, just plain old table salt, whatever it is you use, totally fine. I just want to add another layer of flavor with that smoke, so we're going to use that to season it. I'm going to cut my ribeyes up into strips about 1/4, maybe a 1/2 inch wide by about 1 inch long. Let's go over to the stove. I'm going to show you how we put this together. This is way easier than you probably think it is, I promise. Okay, first things first, we need our pan set on a medium-high heat. Use a heavy bottom pan and about 1 tablespoon of some kind of fat. This is large. You can use beef tallow, clarified butter, just something that can handle the high heat because we need to sear our steak quickly over that medium-high heat to get it to brown quickly. So I'm just gonna make sure I've got a good coating of fat on the bottom of my pan, let that come up to temperature, and then we're going to start browning our steak. Now this is a lot of steak. We don't want to do this all at one time. We're going to do this in batches so that we don't overcrowd the pan. So I'm just going to put in about 1/3 of this beef. I just don't want to put too much to where I can't get the beef down against the bottom of the pan. Once I have done the first batch of this, I'm going to grab my Redmond's smoked salt and I'm going to sprinkle just a good sized pinch over the top. I'm not really seasoning the dish right now. I'm just adding some salt to help pull the moisture out of that steak and brown it quicker. And this will also add a nice smoky flavor that will go into the final dish. I'm just gonna push it around a little bit, make sure all the beef is coated in that oil and touching the bottom of the pan, and then I'm gonna let it sit for 30 seconds to a minute. After about a minute, I'm gonna stir it around. And this is what we're looking for with that high temperature. You can see that brown color on the beef, that is gonna turn into flavor. So we wanna add a little bit of that color to the pieces of beef, but we do not wanna overcook these. So I'm stirring it around, just kind of getting a little bit of that brown color on every piece of meat. And then after maybe 1.5 to 2 minutes in this pan, I'm going to use a slotted spoon. We're gonna remove this beef to a plate, and then we're going to cook the next batch. Okay, so we've had maybe a total of 2 minutes. I'm gonna use a slotted spoon. Go ahead and pull this meat out. I'm not trying to overcook it. It is still going to be pink because this is ribeye. It does not have to be cooked long. We just wanna get a nice brown crust on little bits of this steak all the way around as best we can, and then pull this out of the pan. The pan will then come up to temperature again, and we will add batch number 2. Now I'm gonna go ahead and add batch number 2 of the meat, same process as before. Now I'm using a heavy bottomed Dutch oven. If you have something cast iron like this that has a heavy bottom, it will hold its heat so you can do this relatively quickly. If you use a bottom pan that is thinner, you'll probably have to wait just a couple of minutes for it to come back up to temperature because you don't wanna put this in to a cold pan and have it start to steam, because then you're gonna get this kind of gray, wet meat, and that's not what you want. So I've got a nice hot heat on this again. Same thing, put the beef in, pinch of salt, push it around so it's all touching, and we're gonna put a brown color on that meat. After about a minute, minute and a half, I'm gonna stir that around. Now, when you put your meat in, don't poke at it and keep moving it around. Stick it in there, push it around so it's all touching, and then leave it alone. Once it's starting to brown, we can then come back like this and stir it around just to try to get different parts in contact with the bottom of the pan. We'll let it sit for another minute or so, and you can see this is the color I'm talking about. That's what we're looking for. And after another 30 seconds to a minute, we're gonna go ahead and pull that batch out, and then we'll switch to batch number 3. Here's batch number 3. You can do this in as many batches as necessary, depends on how much meat you're cooking and how large your pan is. Just do whatever works for you. Now we're gonna take the last of the meat out of the pan, and we can start working with all of that beautiful fond. Now that fond, what I'm talking about is that brown color in the bottom of that pan that's cooked off that beef. We're gonna use that because that's all flavor. So first we're gonna dump our spice mixture in on top of the little bit of beef fat and that brown color that's in there, and we're gonna start stirring that around. It's just gonna lightly toast and fry those spices. We're gonna add in that coffee, which is optional of course as well. So if you're not using spices or if you're not using coffee, just skip this step. I'm also gonna add the shrimp powder at this point, also optional. And after 15 to 20 seconds of frying those spices, we're gonna add our beef broth directly into the hot pan, and we're gonna start to stir this all together and try to stir that dark caramelized bit of flavor off the bottom of the pan up into this broth. So stir this really well, scraping the bottom of the pan, trying to get all of that beef that has caramelized to the bottom cooked into the broth, but going back and forth, scraping the bottom of the pan. This is a totally optional thing too. It's just really nice. You can add a little bit of mustard into your broth. You don't have to do this at all. I just really like the flavor of this. So I'm just gonna add about 2 teaspoons of stone ground mustard. If you don't wanna do that, you can totally skip this. Once our broth is up to temperature, we can add the sour cream. Now we're gonna switch to a whisk and we're going to combine the sour cream into the broth really well. Once we have a really nice cohesive mixture, we're going to turn this on to a low heat and we're going to let it sit and simmer and cook down. We want it to reduce about halfway to 2/3. While this begins to simmer, I'm going to set my oven to 325 degrees in preparation of baking the noodles. A little here and there, just run a whisk through your sauce just to make sure it's staying even as it is reducing down. We're going to keep it on that low heat and reduce it by 1/2 to 2/3. Just keep it lightly simmering. Now to make our noodles is really simple. I've got my blender carafe with my cheese in it, and I'm going to dump my 8 eggs in here. So it's between 3 and 4 ounces of shredded cheese, 8 eggs. I'm also going to add in my egg white powder and my gelatin powder right on top. Now I'm going to blend this, take it all the way up to high and blend it till it's really smooth. I'm also going to take a couple of silicone trays here to bake my noodles in. I'm just going to use some lard to grease them. You can use whatever kind of fat you want, just grease them really well. Make sure to get into all of the edges and the corners because you do not want your egg to stick to this when you bake it. Here's our egg mixture after about 30 to 40 seconds of blending. You can see it's nice and thin. I'm going to pour it into these 2 silicone baking trays. I actually have some silicone trays like this linked in my Amazon shop below, so if you're looking for something similar, you can go down there, find some options. These are basically just dehydrator trays. Silicone is good for baking, so it works really, really well, and it holds in a liquid like this better than just a parchment paper on a baking sheet. And because this is a liquid, we can just roll it around to evenly disperse it across the tray. And now our noodles are going to be ready to be baked in the oven. So now we're going to bake these in a 325 degree oven for about 15 minutes or until the edges start to pull away from the sides of the pan slightly. After about 15 minutes, you can see these are starting to look a little puffy and they are ready to come out. And you can see how they're starting to pull away from the edges just a little bit. That pulling away from the edge is exactly what you want. Okay, you can see our mixture is starting to cook down and thicken. This is about 1/3 of the way reduced. We need to take it down further. Keep coming back from time to time with a whisk just to make sure it's all staying incorporated and that you're scraping the bottom of the pan. Once our noodles have cooled, we'll remove them from the pan and we can cut them. You can cut them any way you like it. This is how I'm going to do it. 1 down the center long ways. Stack those 2 pieces together. Roll them up tightly into a cylinder. And I'm going to slice them into wide egg noodle style noodles. And here's what they look like. Now that our liquid has reduced by about half, we're going to take those 2 eggs I had hanging out in the bowl. We're going to use these to thicken the broth. We may end up using 4, but we're going to start with 2. But there's a very specific way we need to do this. So the first thing we're going to do is break these eggs up. We're going to whisk them really well into a combined mixture. You don't want to see a bunch of white and a bunch of yolk all separate. You want to whisk these together really well. Then we're going to take a ladle and we're going to temper the eggs. So we're going to put a small ladle full of this hot mixture right into the bowl of eggs and immediately start to whisk. Whisk this a lot vigorously to combine it really well, and then we're going to do another ladle. Okay, don't do too large of ladles. You don't want to scramble these. Whisk vigorously. And I'm going to do 1 more ladle to try to really combine this and bring these eggs up to temperature so they don't scramble. Now, once we have all of that combined, we are going to slowly pour this mixture back into our main pot, but I'm whisking vigorously, lots and lots of whisking. Continue whisking, and what this is going to do is slowly thicken this liquid. Now, depending on how thick you want your sauce and how much you're going to cook it down, you may end up needing more than 2 eggs, but start with 2 and we can always increase. Okay, you can already see it starting to look a little bit thicker, but I'm definitely going to want it to thicken more, so I'm going to end up using 2 more eggs shortly. Okay, here's another tip. If you're having a hard time with your eggs, they're wanting to separate, you can add a couple tablespoons of heavy whipping cream and whisk it really, really well. You can even use a stick blender to get those eggs distributed in there with that heavy whipping cream. It'll help prevent any further separation if need be. Mine's doing fine for now. All right, while we're waiting for that sauce to cook down, Alice and Kevin, why don't you tell us a little about yourselves and how you got here on this keto carnivore journey?
For myself, I grew up in relatively decent shape, but then after finishing school, university, and starting like 9 to 5 corporate life with a really stressful job, I actually gained about 60 pounds relatively quickly. And then I've always suffered from an autoimmune condition, so I discovered keto just through research online. I saw some initial success with keto, but I found even better success with weight loss, as well as healing of my autoimmune condition with carnivore.
So for me, I actually grew up overweight. I would say that weight was a big uphill battle for me as a child, as well as in the earlier years of my life. By the time I became an adult, I tried a lot of different diets. Weight has never really been a straight line of success for me. It's always kind of been a very yo-yo existence, but over time I have managed to keep it off in the long term with keto, once Kevin discovered it, and eventually carnivore as well.
Awesome. So what are your goals for your health and your journey, and just kind of your future with the keto and low carb communities, as well as your YouTube channel?
The current goal for my health, as well as just overall body composition, is to continue trying to lean out a bit and actually put on some more muscle mass. We recently outfitted a simple home gym in our garage, so we've been kind of working out there, as well as going back to the gym whenever we get some chance with some baby care. So that's our next goal, and the big part of that is just making sure that we're able to exercise and fit it into our schedule.
Yeah, same thing for myself, mostly just looking to stay lean and maintain this level of body composition, continue to build muscle while just enjoying this way of eating. And in terms of our YouTube channel, we are looking to expand a little bit more into some new topics by the end of the year. So while our main focus will still be on things like diet and nutrition, in the long term, we want this YouTube channel to be an area where people can come to improve their health, not just from a diet and nutrition perspective. Obviously those things are important, but then also look into some other things like biohacking and peak performance and what makes humans be the best that they are, and how can we optimize ourselves to live to our full potential.
Very cool. Now, are there any learning curves, steep learning curves especially, or difficulties that either of you have had on this journey to keto and carnivore?
When I first switched to keto, besides just the general keto flu symptoms, I did notice a lot of stomach discomfort. And I think the reason behind that was I was doing a form of healthy keto that included maybe like 10 to 12 cups of vegetables a day. And my stomach just didn't agree with that. Maybe it was just too much fiber or things I couldn't digest. I've always kind of dealt with stomach discomfort throughout my life and just bloating. I did notice a lot of improvement just eliminating things like the grains, the starches, the sugars, the carbs. That made a huge improvement, but it wasn't where I wanted to be yet. So then when I switched to carnivore, that's when I noticed dramatic improvements in my overall digestion and just overall stomach discomfort. So it just felt a lot better overall. So I did actually lose quite a bit of weight doing keto, but I still wasn't feeling my best. So when I switched to carnivore, I thought that was going to be the solution to all my problems, but I actually gained 10 pounds switching onto carnivore. So I was pretty discouraged. I was unsure why I gained that 10 pounds on switching onto carnivore, but I feel like with any type of diet, you can make tweaks, you can make adjustments, and you can adjust certain things that help you achieve your goals a little bit faster. So after a lot of experimentation and kind of figuring out what works for me, I was able to lose that 10 pounds that I gained on carnivore and also lose another 10 pounds on top of that. So now I'm at my goal weight. And right now it's just more about putting on more muscle mass and strength.
I think the biggest difficulty for me was actually in the beginning, which is the keto flu stage. Those first 6 to 8 weeks were really, really rough for me. I think physically it was really rough because your body's just detoxing from carbs. I grew up eating a very high carb diet, and that's just all I know my whole life. Raised to believe that you need carbs to survive. And so I think the mental kind of barrier in the beginning was a little bit difficult. I think another challenge that I had is just figuring out how to recook and re-eat and relearn everything. It's almost like you have to retrain your brain on what to eat, how much to eat, what to cook every night for dinner. So that was a bit of a learning curve, I would say, just like learning how to live a low carb way that's sustainable in the long term. Obviously, there's a lot of online resources now that help with that, including YouTube.
Awesome. So what are some of the improvements that you guys have seen by doing keto and carnivore like this?
The biggest change, in addition to weight loss, is just how you feel physically once you cut out all these sugars, starches, grains, and seed oils, especially when you've just been accustomed to eating that way for so long and thinking that that's the only way. I think it's a very liberating experience to be able to cut those sorts of things from your life and not need them or want to eat them anymore. So I would say like food freedom, in a sense, has been one of the biggest benefits.
Yeah, I would say so too. And I feel like we can eat as much as we want now without any sort of deprivation or anything.
Yeah.
And still be able to maintain a healthy body composition and feel good.
So a funny story, but we actually drove around town trying to find this egg white powder because we went to a bunch of places and they didn't have it in stock, and Amazon also didn't have them in stock. So it's a bit of an adventure finding this egg white powder, but I'm very glad that we were able to find some in time.
The energy and the brain fog has definitely been lifted as well from not eating all the sugar.
Yeah, we used to definitely go through the blood sugar roller coasters all day long. I remember just being slumped over at my desk after lunch, after going out with coworkers and stuff, and it wasn't even necessarily a big lunch. It's not like we were like eating huge buffet lunches, just regular food, right? But because of the carbs, you would just be so tired in the afternoon, multiple coffees a day to get you through the day. And that sort of physical aspect has been lifted completely. We just feel consistent throughout the day. It's made sleep better. It's made our workouts better. Everything is just, you just feel great when you're in ketosis, I would say. Pouring the mixture into a small baking sheet. You can also use silicone baking trays, but we don't have any. We actually ordered some and they were supposed to come today on Amazon, but then they changed the delivery date on us. Make do with what we have, which is just a tray with parchment paper with raised edges.
The other big improvement is just the overall feeling for myself is just in the stomach digestion realm, because yeah, it's definitely improved. I never feel bloating anymore, never have any stomach pains anymore. So I think just cutting out the carbs as well as eating way too many vegetables in the past probably helped me a lot, because I do have some food sensitivities.
I personally don't have any food sensitivities. I don't really have a problem with the fiber either, so I can do fiber or no fiber. It doesn't really make a difference for me. I would say just the biggest benefit is just cutting out all the sugars, starches, grains, and seed oils. That's where I've seen the most dramatic life improvement.
Okay, cool. So do you guys see yourselves sticking with this diet permanently, long term? Do you think you're gonna modify? What does that future look like for you?
I see ourselves sticking with this way of eating in the long term.
Just some form of low carb, at least.
Yeah, definitely keeping the carbs low.
And no processed food. Just real food is kind of what we practice and what we preach for ourselves.
Yeah, we really enjoy eating this way. It's just simple and it's nutritious and it just keeps us satiated for long periods of time. And we don't have to think about food as much, which has been a huge burden lifted. We're constantly thinking about what to eat and how to eat. This way we just eat till we're full and we perform well just in the gym and just through our regular lives as well. Obviously there's always new information and science coming out, and we'll always stay tuned to see all the new information and see how it applies to us and how it affects what an optimal human diet is.
That's awesome. So are there any other services, information you guys would like to tell people about? Any upcoming projects or anything that you would like to promote to the audience?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So we are in the process of launching our 30-day carnivore meal planning cookbook. So if that is something that you are interested in, please do stay tuned to our channel for updates.
We help our clients with strategies, meal plans, one-on-one accountability, and also help them troubleshoot any issues they might be having. We've gone through this process on a meat-based diet ourselves, and also helped many clients get success on their own weight loss journey. Coaching clients one-on-one is something we're really passionate about. So if you're stuck, or maybe you just want to accelerate your weight loss and fat loss eating a whole foods meat-based diet, that's something we can definitely provide.
Great. And where can everyone find you if they'd like to learn more or reach out to you, to contact you, to be a part of what you do?
Our social media handle is the same on all platforms. You can find us on YouTube at AllisonKev, as well as on Instagram and on TikTok. We also have a food blog where you can find detailed keto and carnivore recipes at justrealfood.com.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing all of that and for being here on the channel. Let's go check on that sauce, everybody. Okay, so after cooking down a little further, I still want this to be a little bit thicker. So I have 2 more eggs. I'm gonna go through the same process that I just did, and we're gonna make it a little thicker. Now this is purely a visual thing, but I've reduced this down. I'm gonna use a stick blender just to make it a little smoother. You don't have to do this. It's not gonna affect the flavor in any way. It just makes it look a little smoother as you combine all of these things together. And now you can see everything is starting to look smoother. This has reduced down to about 1/3 of its original volume, and you can see it's getting thicker and thicker. And once we put the noodles and the beef in here, it will continue to coat that perfectly. Taste it, add salt if need be, and you're good to go. All right, y'all, here's our thickened sauce mixture. It's time to put it all together. All right, y'all, that is the carnivore beef stroganoff made just for Alice and Kevin. I'm gonna be really interested to see what they think in a minute, but before they test it, we're gonna try it out.
That's good.
Using the ribeye is such a great idea. You do things like chuck roast or, you know, whatever, and you can cook them low and slow and, you know, do a pressure cook kind of thing. But using a really high quality meat like this, it's just so good.
Definitely. Also, these noodles are really, really, really good. I grew up eating a lot of beef stroganoff. I love beef stroganoff. It's really good. I mean, it literally just tastes like my childhood beef stroganoff. Like I remember it, but just better.
Let's see what Alice and Kevin think.
Super excited to try.
Sauce is so good.
It is so good. I feel like you can put it on everything. I've definitely tried some mozzarella egg noodles in the past where it's just too cheesy, but that's a really good balance of egg and cheese where it's not overly cheesy, and the texture held up really well with the sauce, which is really important.
Texture's good. They're really strong. Typically, you're kind of worried that they'll break. Yeah, very good.
The sauce is super creamy. It really tastes like beef stroganoff. I think this far exceeded our expectations.
I think next time we'll make more noodles. We did half the recipe, but I think if we had the silicone trays, it would have made it a lot. The noodles would have been thinner. Yeah, we substituted the ribeye for New York strips. Chris mentioned you can do this with chuck roast as well if you just pressure cook it, so that's a good idea. Yeah, one thing we've been really missing eating carnivore is like that gravy style sauce. A really good version of it.
This one's a winner.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, y'all, there you go. You heard it from Alice and Kevin. You heard it from my wife. You heard it from me too. This is a killer recipe. I'm definitely gonna be making this more, especially when they put those thin cut ribeyes that are kind of hard to cook as just a steak by itself and keep it nice and medium rare. When those go on sale, this is a great way to enjoy them for sure. Guys, we're gonna really enjoy this. I hope you all try this. I hope you use it for your family. I think anybody's gonna love this. Imagine this is gonna be amazing as leftovers as well.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for hanging out. All of the links are down below, and I'm gonna link down below to Alice and Kevin as well. If you guys have not yet checked them out, please go to their channel, like and subscribe and watch their stuff because they're doing amazing things in the carnivore and keto communities. And quite honestly, it was a pleasure and an honor for me to get to do my first dedicated recipe for them because they're just awesome. We actually have a lot in common with them. She's keto and I'm carnivore. Alice is more keto and Kevin is more carnivore because of food sensitivity things. Like we have a lot in common with them, and They're just doing great things in this community. So go show them some of the Chris Cooking Nashville love if you don't already follow them. Thank you guys so much for watching. Find all the links in the description down below. We love you guys very much. Eat your meat, love your life. This is Chris Cooking Nashville and Mrs. Chris Cooking Nashville. We're gonna see you guys in the kitchen for the next recipe.
Puppy, there's the puppy.